Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tech Talk Tuesdays. My name is Michael Gabbianelli, and I'll be your host today. Today's episode is going to be about sleeping bags. Your sleeping bag when camping is your best friend. It's going to keep you warm. It's going to be your base camp. It's going to be the thing that's going to help you get up in the morning feeling fresh to hit the trail again or to go climbing, because what's going to keep you warm throughout the night. Um, so today in today's episode, we're going to talk about the two kinds of sleeping bags, and we're going to talk about the pros and cons of each bag as we go. So what we'll do is we're going to start with the first kind of sleeping bag, which is going to be our synthetic sleeping bag. So here I have my synthetic sleeping bag. It is in the compression sack. So this is the way I'm going to carry it when I'm out in the woods and I need to keep it nice and tight. So if I'm going to put it in my backpack, I'm going to keep it in my compression sack. It's got these nice straps that I can keep to tighten it down and to make it up even smaller. When I get to where I'm going, I'm going to take it out of my compression sack, pull that bad boy out. This is my synthetic sleeping bag again. So our synthetic sleeping bags, they're going to look very similar, right? It's going to be hard to tell the difference between a sleeping bag that's synthetic or down without really reading that tag and finding out what is the fill on that sleeping bag. So these synthetic sleeping bags are actually filled with polyester fibers. They are water resistant, which is really great. So they'll actually keep you warm even when they get wet. Um, they're not very expensive, which is great. That being said, some of the cons of this bag is that they are very heavy compared to their counterparts. So their warmth to weight ratio is lower than that down sleeping bag. Um, and they also aren't as durable. So every time I stuff this sleeping bag into my stuff sack, it's actually going to slightly reduce the fill or the loft of the polyester in here. So loft just means how much airspace that fabric is going to, those fibers are going to create. And so every time I stuff this into a small container, it's going to compress those fibers a little bit more each and every time, making my sleeping bag a little cooler as we get going. As we talk about this, one thing to remember is both kinds of bags can come in a range of different temperature ratings. And so the bag will be rated to the lowest temperature that they recommend you sleep in that bag safely. That being said, a 32-degree bag on a 32-degree night is going to be maybe a little bit cold. And so they've rated that to the average sleeper. What you want to do is you find out what temperature rating is good for you at what temperature outside. And that might just take a little bit of trial and error as you go through what you're doing. I find I sleep a little bit cooler, so I actually have slightly warmer bag than what I might need. This bag actually right here is a 32-degree bag, so that's a pretty lightweight bag. Um, so synthetic sleeping bags. This is our version. Besides the temperature rating, they will also come in different shapes. So this is a mummy bag, meaning it's got a mummy shape. So the feet are really small. There's a hood that wraps over your head like King Tut, and your face pokes right out of it. And it's more constricting, right? So it's a little bit narrower. That being said, because it's a smaller area, it should get warmer faster. Um, what we did talk about was those compression sacks. One thing about sleeping bags that you want to be aware of, most of them are going to come with what we call just a storage bag. And it's just going to be a big sack for you to keep that sleeping bag in. And what this does is it keeps you from compressing your synthetic bag when it's not in use. So when I store it like this, it's not actually reducing the thermal value of my bag. Instead of, if I throw it into my compression sack for storage, it will be compressing those fibers while it's not in use. So again, use your storage bag when you're not in storage. They are big and bulky when they're in the storage bag, and it can take a lot of space, but it's going to make your sleeping bag last longer, stay warmer. Great. So that's the first kind of sleeping bag. that again, that's our synthetic sleeping bag. Some of the pros of that sleeping bag is it's not going to be super expensive. They're going to be water resistant, and they can keep you warm even when they're wet. And so those are the pros on that. The cons are they're going to be pretty heavy compared to the weight to warmth ratio is going to be lower on a synthetic sleeping bag. So they're going to be heavier for a lower degree bag than their down. Um, and they can be less durable. So every time we pack that bag, we're going to be reducing the thermal value of that bag. Great. So the other option we have is what we call a down sleeping bag. So the down sleeping bag is going to be made of goose down or duck down. A lot of them are being made by duck down nowadays. Um, and again, just like their counterparts, are going to be rated to different levels of temperature. So what you'll see is the lower the temperature the bag is rated for, the higher the fill power, which means there's going to be more feathers, which are actually the feathers underneath the plumage. That those feathers are actually there's going to be more of them per square inch and more fill. And so a lower level or lower temperature bag is going to have more fill. Um, Again, this one is actually a warmer bag than the one we just pulled out. This is a 0-degree sleeping bag. And what you're going to notice about these down bags is that they're really lightweight for their warmth. So the warmth to weight ratio is much higher for your down bags. They're super easy to compress. So since there are smaller fibers in there, they can be compressed. They do not, and they're more durable. So as you compress them, you're not going to be affecting your thermal value as much as with a synthetic bag. So you're not compressing those fibers down. Some cons is that these are going to be more expensive than their counterparts, as well as they can be water resistant. However, when they get wet, they take a long time to dry and they do not keep you dry when they're wet. So if your down bag gets wet, it's not going to be useful in the way that a synthetic bag gets wet. So a lot of times people might bring a synthetic bag over a down bag for things like a river trip or something where you might get your sleeping bag wet. So down bags, again, filled with goose or duck feathers. Very good warmth to weight ratio. What we have here is, unlike the other one, it's not a mummy bag. This one is actually called a semi-rectangular bag, and so it's rectangular all the way down to the feet, but the upper area still has my mummy bag with the hood. And then if we go one more, we can go into a full rectangular bag, and those are going to be kind of those old Coleman style sleeping bags that you used to find in your grandparents' garage or something, where it's just one big rectangle that zips together. And so again, more area that the bag takes up, the more heat it's going to take to get that bag warm. And so through making these bags a little bit smaller, they've been able to cut down weight for when you're backpacking, as well as make them so they can stay warmer more quickly. Um, a couple of cool things that have been innovations in the sleeping bag industry as of recently we'll talk about is that a lot of new sleeping bags have what we call a sleeping pad holder. And so there's a sleeve in this bag where the sleeping pad will slip into and actually keep you on your sleeping bag. And so the synthetic bag doesn't have that. So when I sit my sleeping bag on top of my pad, I can roll one way or the other, and the pad will stay on the ground, and my body will be on the dirt within my sleeping bag, which obviously won't be as warm or comfortable as being on my pad. So these nice new sleeping bags with the sleeping pad covers actually have you slip that pad right in, and so you cannot possibly roll off your pad. It's connected to your sleeping bag. So that's a really cool design. A lot of new companies are doing that as well. This company, Big Agnes, who makes this bag, also has, I think, pretty cool pillowcase holder. And so inside my bag, I have a pillowcase. I can stuff my clothes in here to make myself a little pillow for when I'm sleeping. Again, just like our synthetic bags, we're going to want to store our down bags in a bigger bag than the compression sack to keep it from losing insulative value and cramping up those fibers when we don't need to. Again, we use those constriction bags or the compression sacks for when we are using our bag in a backpack or something. We need to get it down nice and small. Cool. So that's been our talk for today. Hopefully, you guys learned something about sleeping bags. And remember, always check with a professional when buying this gear and test them out. A lot of times they'll have different options for you to look at and test out at a store, so you can find out what sleeping bag is best for you. Um, Thank you for joining us. This has been an episode of Tech Talk Tuesday, and we'll see you next week.